There's like three main things when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with a short-term rental. One, location. You got to pick a location that you are comfortable with. You're going to have to visit the property multiple times a year, so it's got to be somewhere where you're comfortable going to and from. It's not just buy it, like set it and forget it. That's not how it'll work. The other thing, and this is the main caveat I'll say, is the local laws, zoning rules and regulations. You might think this property is great, this house is a steal, but if it's not zoned correctly and there's no pathway to kind of changing that zoning, you might have just bought something that you end up can't renting. So my name is Tyler, co-owner of Adirondack Lakeside Getaways, located upstate New York in Lake George, New York, in the Adirondack region. It's a small collection of 8 boutique cabins that we've kind of curated and built from the ground up. And we try to offer a vacation experience to families, similar to an experience that we've had growing up upstate New York, and looking to expand and just kind of get the business to where we wanted to see it.
The business structures you have, as you said, your different cabins and people can stay there. But one thing that Erin mentioned is that you guys are open 365 days a year. My question to you is, two questions, it's a two-part question, and I don't know, you can answer them however you'd like. Why choose a business model where there is a busy season and there is a slow season? I'm curious the thought process behind that. And two, what are you actively doing to make that slow season busier?
Yeah, so Lake George traditionally has always been a seasonal vacation destination. May to October, our favorite time to go up there is definitely in the summer. Late August is like the sweet spot. And then even going into the fall when you see, leaves changing colors and you kind of get like that shoulder season, we'll call it. We always had a draw to Lake George, just being so familiar with it and always having great experience and great memories. And we kind of were like, if there's a spot where, we're going into a business where we have no idea what we're doing, because at the beginning we have literally no idea what we were doing going into this, at least there was some familiarity with the area. We knew that we could kind of curate something along the lines to at least, during busy season, figure it out. But even being the off season, there's plenty going on within the town and the village itself. Myself, I'm an avid snowboarder. Erin likes to ski, so we always find ourselves going up there January, February. It's great to just like get away for the weekend. You could stay within Lake George. There's plenty of mountains within New York. Gore Mountain's about 35 minutes away. So, it's like a little oasis, I think, to kind of say it that way. And then to your second question, I think, something that we're trying to undertake a little bit more is try to explain to people and kind of market it more in terms of, yes, everybody's heard of Lake George if you're from Long Island or you live in New York. It's like, I know to go up there during the summertime, but like, what is there to do during the winter? And I think there's an area of room for growth to kind of, when you have a business, you want to, yes, there's a trajectory and there's a path that you can take, but there's like untapped potential with these winter stays. During the whole month of February, Lake George has a winter carnival, which is great. Every weekend they have action-packed events. When the lake froze over this year, which was great, last year it didn't. So they're doing car races on the lake, outhouse races, ice fishing is huge up there, family bonfires with s'mores. Like there's all these events going on in the wintertime where you wouldn't really necessarily know unless you like knew the region. So we're trying to kind of get that message out there, and it's a very outdoorsy specific location, being in the Adirondacks, but I think it's trying to get that message out that there's tons to do in whatever season that you're in.
I really appreciate that perspective because I think that the way you phrase it is just interesting in the sense most people would, when they think of this stuff, they think of what would work really well, or hey, this is a problem that I have, and the slow season being the problem. Or just like the con that comes with the pro of having something in Lake George. And the way you phrased it is more of like an untapped potential. And I think that so much of business is how you perceive things. And if you see things like, at my church, the pastor's always talking about being a yes person. And what that means is like, if there's a problem, it doesn't necessarily, like, don't necessarily think of it as a problem. Think of it as like an opportunity, the cliche of an opportunity, but it's true. Where it's like we so often are our own worst enemies, and when we think about like, oh, it's a slow season, it is what it is. Okay, then it's just going to be what it is. But if you're like, no, it's an opportunity to get, so now there's all these people that don't know about Lake George, all these people in the winter. That's a huge market for us that we can capitalize on. I think that's a really, really cool perspective, and I think you'll notice over the next 5-10 years, whatever the case may be, cabin rentals will be booked and the people next door won't be because they don't have that perspective.
Yeah, and I also think that it's like a balance. So like there's established hotels and brands and businesses that have been up there for years, and they're very strict on, I'm the Memorial Day to Labor Day, maybe a couple weeks before, maybe a couple weeks after, and then they shut down operations. Whether that's for labor reasons or if the operation's very large, it might get difficult to run it when it's a little bit slower. But our the employees are that we have, it's Erin and myself and our really great cleaning team and our really great maintenance team. Um, and I kind of handle everything together as a cohesive unit. We work really, really well together. So we felt comfortable staying open during the winter. There's different aspects that, within short-term rentals that come up during the winter time. Frozen pipes, is something going to break? Okay, it just snowed 8 inches. Now our guests are like basically trapped in there. How do we get them out? Okay, we have a maintenance team that's ready to go in and snow plow, snow blow, shovel, whatever you need to do. But it's kind of like, we kind of learn this along the way. But going into it, we always wanted it to be open 365 because I think that there is, a beauty of going up there in the wintertime and, you know, working in the city, or if you work on Long Island and you're in the hustle and bustle and you kind of get up there and just escape. It's a nice to just like relax, breathe. I know there's other things out there, and like we can offer that to people in the off season when there's not many options up there, besides a couple hotels that are open here and there. But if people want their own private space, a little bit off the beaten path, you could still walk to the village. You could still enjoy the winter carnival, and you could walk back and hang out at the fire pit with your family after. It's like a nice balance between like a traditional, hey, we're going to go up there and stay in a hotel, or hey, we have our own space and we can relax.
Yeah, and to piggyback again off the conversation I had with Erin, we talk about marketing and how to get the name out there, and we talked about social media and utilizing some of the stuff that's out there already and stuff that's happening in the town. And I think that if you guys are up there all that often, or even if you're not, you can quote unquote hire somebody that's in the area, like filming the stuff that's at the winter carnival and saying, hey, look at all the stuff that's happening in Lake George. Come stay. Or you honestly trying to find content from last year that you could post in December or January. Be like, it's 3 weeks until the winter carnival. You can still book your Airbnb. Like I had no idea that happened, and now I'm not. Now I'm like, okay, so our baby's due in November. She'll be, or he or she, I don't even know, will be 3 months old. Is that too early to bring the kid up there? I'm like, that sounds so cool, the winter
Yeah.
card, So like, I was already planning it in my head. So like, I didn't know. So I think that personally, what I found in business is that, and through these conversations that I've had, is you could have the best product in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's all about getting your name out there. It's more than anything.
Yeah, we've definitely relied heavily on Airbnb platform getting up and off the ground, because at the end of the day, if you're starting a short-term rental business, on paper you're just another place that I can rent versus somebody else, and it's like, how do you differentiate yourself between that? And definitely the word of mouth, between people staying there. We're so grateful to have people. We have no reviews. I don't know if you've rented from Airbnb before or short-term rental, but like most of the places I'd stay, I'm scrolling through the reviews, I'm making sure. So we're very grateful that people took the chance on us when we had no reviews, no credibility, nothing, and took that chance. We were able to give them a great experience that they want to keep coming back. And as Erin said before, we've had families stay there 5, 6, 7 times. People keep coming back. They're bringing their friends, they're bringing their family, and it's kind of just like spreading the word that way. So the growth kind of happened, I say, organically, and we can kind of see that with the like occupancy that we've had, building up from small. We're so happy we got one stay on one weekend, and then now we're coming to this year, and we're really happy that like people are asking, hey, can we book? And we have nothing, no availability or people to kind of stay. So it's crazy how quick things can go from a nothing to now it's like a established business. But I think it's a it's like a balance between do we want to keep pushing all of this, and keep expanding it? And I think that's, seeing the results from the experience that these families are having.
Tell me about your first day. What was that like? The prep for that, the experience for you. What would tell like I think that again, I think that there's a lot of people that would be interested in short-term rentals or just in rentals in general.
Yeah.
And I think that that first one, they're like, what do I expect? So what was it like?
Yeah, we were super nervous for our first guest, because it's like, dude, everything that we've put into this and everything that we've tried to decorate, night, we'd have to make sure all the essentials are in there. Is this, up to the standards of the guest that's going to stay? And even prior to that, it's not as simple as, hey, I'm going to purchase a short-term rental. I could fix it up a little bit, add some more amenities, and then like I'm just going to throw it out there. Erin and I, we stayed in each all 8 of our cabins for like extended stays for like long weekends, and we basically said, okay, we want to experience what the guest is going to experience. Is everything one working correctly? If I'm sleeping, is the Wi-Fi light, in my eyesight? Does
Wow, you
does
really cared
does the
every detail,
does the
man.
door creak when I open it? If someone gets up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, is it too loud? Is the AC working correctly? Is it easy to operate everything? Does the Wi-Fi work? And you're trying to think through all these things so that, when guests get there, they don't have to worry about anything. Like they pick up, they pack their bag, they go up there, and then we just want them to like disconnect and not even worry about something breaking or something, being there. It's not going to work for everybody. Some people are very particular with something, but for the most part, like going through that experience and like, living out what that guest is going to experience, I think that really helped us feel a little more at ease, getting that first guest. So I think that was definitely helped us.
Well, it's interesting, like, because I think that you probably just mitigated 25 reviews that like could have been like an issue. Like, even if it's a 4 instead of a 5, but it was a great stay, but I woke up every time my wife went to the bathroom because the door creaked. Like, you just fixed that issue before it even happened. I think that's brilliant. I think that's something everybody should do.
Yeah,
That's such a great idea.
yeah,
I actually really like that.
yeah. Getting if you're getting into short-term rentals, I would definitely say stay at the property and experience it how you would want a guest to
Take
experience
notes
it.
and adjust accordingly. I think that's
Exactly.
such a great
Does
idea.
it have everything that you would want in a rental if you were going to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
Do you want to match that same experience and give everybody the best that you can get?
That's great. I think that's so interesting. You mentioned both you and Erin that you are potentially like looking to expand and debating that and maybe announcing something soon. Do you ever foresee this becoming a full-time gig for you guys?
I would love it to become a full-time gig because I think that, my background is in finance. I've worked for a publishing company, e-com company, food distributor and manufacturer, now working for a e-commerce company again. But um, I think like that background and like, being involved in numbers and, getting into all that is great. But I think that there's, something to the hospitality business that like you can't get from a normal 9 to 5 job, that like I feel like, it's something missing. So like yes, this is a part-time. It's basically two full-time jobs. We're both working full-time and doing this full-time. But I think that, if this were to evolve more, I could see myself and, Erin as well, you know getting this off the ground and into a full-fledged, full-time thing. There's something about the connection that you get with guests. Uh, you know, we have little like review notebooks within the cabins, and sometimes guests write like their experience, and like just reading that, like, hey, we had a great time, our family got to connect. We don't see them that often. It's nice to hear these stories, and it gives you like that extra push to like, hey, if we can do this now for this many cabins, like why can't we keep doing that and giving, more guests and more families, the experience and the memories that they can get. So that's definitely like a driving factor of like where we kind of want to see it go, because, we've had such a good time growing up there. We see the families now that are coming through have great time, and they're giving us great feedback, and, hey, if we had this or we had that, and, we had so much fun. So seeing that, I'd definitely like to see this go even larger.
Yeah. Another content idea just popped in my head for you guys is like you mentioned that little review book. I've stayed in plenty of Airbnbs where they've had that. Um, Putting a little note, hey, send us a video of you, like a video review. Like we'd like, most people, if obviously, not most people might not do it, but if you get 1, 2, 3 a month or whatever, and it's a good review, you could post it on your social media as another testimonial thing. Like this is
That would
why
be
we loved
awesome.
it.
Yeah.
So that being said, talking about experiences at Airbnbs and short-term rentals, let's flip the script a little. As somebody, I used to travel a lot for work. I don't necessarily travel as much anymore. I miss it a lot. That's beside the point. Um, with that being said, what's the best practices to get as a stayer, as a guest, to get the most out of an Airbnb?
So I think when you're even scrolling like to find out, where you want to stay, I think finding your location where like this is going to work for me. I think that's like first and foremost. Making sure that if you're looking through the reviews, you can see like the host is a great communicator, because you might run into an issue. Hopefully not, but if you do, you want someone that's going to be responsive and able to tell you what's going on. Also, if someone who is a host that's local to the area, that's super helpful. I think, knowledge of the local area, maybe finding some places that are off the beaten path, not the touristy spots, and like having a host that has that, I think is like a level up. So if you're searching through and you're like looking to stay at an Airbnb, definitely try to like scroll through those reviews, scroll through the host profile, see if they're local to the area. It definitely helps. Like the little things that make that experience that much better. Because at the end of the day, it is the person down the street also has a rental, and then there's another person that has a rental. But as a person who wants to stay at a place, you kind of want that experience like elevated a little bit. Trying to everyone works hard, spend their money. They want to have that best experience. Like how can you best find that experience? And it's just like doing that little extra research.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about the mom and pop shops, the local hidden gems. What are some of those to you and Erin in Lake George that most people go to this spot, but really this spot's really great, or whatever the case may be?
So I think a lot of the times when people think of Lake George, they focus specifically on Lake George Village. The downtown spot. There's the steamboat company with the Minnehaha. You could take boat tours. There's tons of great bars and restaurants, on Canada Street, which is the main street there. But sometimes we like to push our guests maybe a 10-minute, 15-minute drive south. There's a town called Glens Falls. There's a lot of these like entrepreneurial type people who started their own restaurants. Maybe they were a line cook somewhere else and now they have their own spot. And it's like a really cool experience because you can tell that these businesses, they're also small businesses. They're trying to get off the ground, get it going. They might not have as much traction as a Lake George because Lake George is the main draw. So we try to tell our guests, hey, check out this area. You might like it a little bit more. Your family have a little bit more space. It'll be a little more slow paced. Try that out. There's Bolton Landing is another town up on the west side of the lake. Again, if you just are going to Lake George Village, you might not say, it's 20-minute drive. I don't want to go there. But again, super small shops, local places. And it's just like, how do you give the idea to the guests that it's not just, Lake George itself is amazing, but there's so many things within that general vicinity that like other people should check out as well. And then one thing we like to tell our guests too is visiting the lake. The lake itself is amazing. If you're visiting Lake George, you have to get out on the water, whether that's renting your own boat or if you're bringing your own boat up, like check it out. Steamboat tour is great. They got evening cruises, fireworks cruises. There's always so much going on, but seeing the lake and the town and the outside area from the lake, it just gives you a different perspective. So we try to push guests to like experience these little nooks and crannies along the way.
I would agree with that. I mean, I haven't been I think I've been there definitely once, if not maybe twice when I was a kid. But more recently, I went. And going from on the water was probably one of the best parts of it. It was breathtaking. But that being said, do you see yourself ever expanding into the experience side of things, like offering boat rentals or jet ski rentals or something like that, or fishing gear that like people can add on essentially?
Yeah, so we're actually, as in the entrepreneurial spirit, Aaron and I, we had the idea of, hey, well, why don't we, do like a boat charter or like, we'll captain the boat. We have a lot of extensive knowledge about the area, the history. There's, hundreds of different small islands around the lake. Like we'll take the guests around and they can experience it, however they want to experience it. But we'll handle the driving, the narration, you could say, and like offering that as like an add-on to guests. We haven't gotten to do that yet, just given our full-time jobs, and we're try to get up there on weekends when we can. But eventually, we'd like to see that kind of take off as well to kind of give guests that experience, within our own cabin community and.
You'd be living my father-in-law's dream. He again lives in Tampa, and he's always had this idea. It's like, I'd love to rent out like jet skis and stuff, and then take people around and show them all the different islands and all this stuff. And I'm like, just do it, man. Like, what do you
Yeah.
do? So you'd be living his dream.
Yeah, we're looking forward to doing that. It's definitely on our checklist of things we'd like to expand and do,
Yeah.
but piece by piece.
One day at a time, man. I think that there's so many different things in business. I think every business is like, oh, I want to be doing. I mean, even with this podcast, there's a million things I want to be doing with the podcast. But you can only do what you can today, and then tomorrow's another day.
Yep.
So, what you kind of both touched on it, but if you could, like, what specifically do you think differentiates your cabins over another cabin or Airbnb or hotel experience?
So I think the main differentiator when it comes to short-term rental and specifically within the Lake George region, I'd say first and foremost, it's location. You have to be located in a spot that's, not directly in the hustle and bustle of the town, but you're like, steps away from the beach and it's, you come back from dinner and it's nice and quiet and you could sit around the fire pit. Having that balance of the location where we're located and then also the experience that we can offer. Each cabin has its own individual fire pit. We've traveled around a bunch and we've stayed at some places and it's like a community fire pit. Even though everyone has their own individual cabin, it's a community fire pit. And then, sometimes there's not enough seats and you can't do that. So it's like, how do you best offer that experience for that specific family? So like they're their own family unit, they can hang out on their own. They don't have to, if they don't want to share and explain, hey, can we use a fire pit too? Everyone has their own individual thing. So we try to make an individual experience for the family that's staying there. That being said, we do have cabins that are located right next to each other. So a lot of times it's like big family groups coming together, and they have the space on their own side of the property that they can do
Like
what
they
they
rented
want
out
to.
several of them, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and we try to if guests are inquiring, we're saying, hey, these three cabins are located the closest to each other. You guys will have this whole left side of the property. That might work out great. They can barbecue together. They can all hang out, play lawn games, enjoy the fire pit. Try to offer that experience, and we really try to give recommendations and really curate their whole trip. We don't just want to be a checkbox on a vacation. Okay, got the Airbnb, we got the travel plans, like that's good. Like we always try to offer, hey, you guys are coming to the area. There's a local art festival in the neighboring town. Not sure if you guys are interested, but it's out there. So that they might not have known that that's something going on, but we always try to give some suggestions and recommendations. Not only things that we like to do, but things that also help support local businesses and the surrounding towns.
Such an interesting business model you guys have, especially not necessarily in this fact that like it's short-term rentals because there's a dime a dozen of those, but just the way you guys are managing it is I think really unique compared to so many others. And again, one thing you just said was the fact that like we're not just we don't aim to be just a check off their list when they're planning their trip. We plan to curate their experience. I think is a really unique perspective on how like I mean we just went to Sag Harbor for July 4th, and the Airbnb was a check on our list, and it was great, but it was just, oh, we got the Airbnb, but we had to make sure it hit all these things. We brought our dog, we brought our daughter, and like so how to fit all these things, but it was just a check on the list, and that was only it, but that's so interesting. Had it been like, hey, by the way, this is going on, or hey, you should check out this, or hey, we also offer a boat tour. It would be a very interesting um, business model.
Yeah, we try to kind of expand upon the normal like thinking of like what a short-term rental is. Like everyone understands what Airbnb is or VRBO, and hey, we're gonna not use a hotel this time. We're gonna get our own place. But it's like, how do you go above and beyond like the next expectation? How do you like impress the guest? How do you, it also helps the guests say, hey, I had a great time. Like I want to come back now, and I want to bring friends. I want to bring family. I want other people to experience the same thing I experienced. Because we always say at the end of the day, people work very hard, whatever they do, whatever line of work they in, they work hard, they make money, they want to take their family on a nice vacation, but it's like, how do you then make that experience for them even better? Like as a
Yeah.
kid, my family, we always went to Montauk in addition to Lake George. So it's like we always went there and we knew like what we were getting, but I feel like there's, you're still missing something of like the local atmosphere that maybe I never knew. So
Yeah.
we try to push our guests to experience those extra things.
So you mentioned the idea that hypothetically one day you'd love to make this your full-time job. Do you see if that becomes the case, you guys moving up there full time, or do you think you still like this Long Island area and you'd commute back and forth?
I still, we still love the Long Island area. I think, growing up here, once you're here, you feel like you don't want to leave because it's so nice. That being said, we could, potentially spend extended periods of time upstate and then down here in Long Island as well. So definitely a balance, not too much of one, not too much of the
Yeah.
other.
So to piggyback again on the conversation that we had with Erin, we spoke about people that might be interested in doing something similar. What would you say in your perspective of like they want to get into this, they're not sure what to expect or the practicality of starting a short-term rental?
I'd say there's like three main things when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with a short-term rental. One, first, location. You got to pick a location that you are comfortable with because it's not just buy it, like set it and forget it. That's not how it'll work. You're gonna have to visit the property multiple times a year, so it's got to be somewhere where you're comfortable going to and from. That being said, within the market itself that you're looking in, there's great statistical data available on there's a website called AirDNA. They also have a podcast as well, and it kind of deep dives where you can see specific little snippets of a region. So if you were in Lake George and you're zooming in, and you could say, okay, what do the comps look like in this area? If I had a 3 bedroom house with 2 bathrooms, pool, and that, this is how much I would expect to get. And you can get like super specific with that. So it's a lot of like background research that you should go into before, pulling the trigger and saying, yes, I want to put all my hard-earned money into purchasing a short-term rental. I think the other thing, and this is the main caveat I'll say, is the local laws, zoning rules and regulations. You might think this property is great, this house is a steal, I can fix this up and make it for what it is. But if it's not zoned correctly and there's no pathway to kind of changing that zoning, you might have just bought something that you end up can't renting. So I would say find your location, do your research on that area, figure out the zoning, make sure that it's short-term rental friendly. Specifically, if it's more of a tourist destination, you're more likely going to have more friendly short-term rentals. I know there's certain areas where it's more residential and it's kind of not so short-term rental friendly, so you might be, getting yourself into a bit of a situation doing it that way. And then yeah, just doing your research and making sure the numbers and the underwriting works. A lot of times when we were going through a bunch, we must have gone through 100, 150, 200 different properties, single family homes, cabin colonies, all in the kind of Adirondack upstate region. We finally settled on the one we found. However, like going through that, always kind of be very conservative in your how much are things going to cost? You know, do I have enough money to cover if something breaks? It's not always going to be a rosy situation where like, hey, if everything works out perfectly, I'll come out, cash flow positive and we're good to go. You always kind of have to plan for the worst and expect, things aren't going to go so well. And if the numbers make sense even after doing that worst case scenario, then yes, that's probably a good spot to make it happen. But I think there's a lot of background work and research and things that you have to do in order to feel comfortable. At the end of the day, you got to feel comfortable before going into it.
Yeah, two things you said that I wanted to comment on are really interesting. One, the worst case scenario financial situation is really interesting. I think so many people, myself included, many a times, like they start counting their chickens before they hatch, and you're like, oh, if this happens and this happens, I'm gonna be rolling in money. It's gonna be great. And there's so many factors, and you end up losing money because it just doesn't work. So if you look at the worst case scenario of like, okay, what if nobody rents for 3 months? What does that look like? What if all these things, right? It's a great perspective. And then if it still makes sense, or if you can stomach that loss, then it makes sense. But the other thing that you said that I think is a really interesting point is the zoning and permits. In fact, I had a buddy. So I don't know how it ended up working out because I'm not getting into the politics of the local area, but Northport doesn't allow short-term rentals, which is a town that we film in, the town that I grew up in, I live in. Um, and so my buddy had an Airbnb and the town was all over him. I don't know how a hotel opens up with that's obviously short-term rentals. Nobody's staying there extended periods of time. So I don't know what the situation was going on with that. But yeah, my buddy had a beautiful loft Airbnb, um, and the town just wouldn't let him have it, and it was a shame. But regardless, so like you said though, like if you don't know that, you buy this property, you could be screwed really, really quickly.
Yeah, things can go downhill real quick.
So practically, what would you like look into? How would you go about like the zoning and permitting questions of that?
So a lot of times, whether it be the town website or the county that you're in, they'll have, now being 2025, people, short-term rentals are of the utmost, at the highest priority of, if you're a residential area and things like that, people always want to know. So usually there's something on the town website or county website that'll kind of guide you towards, hey, this is how we feel about short-term rentals. This is the area that they're allowed in. And if not, just start calling people. Just pick up the phone. Hey, I'm looking in the area. Is this something that you guys offer within your town? And it's like a lot of times we got a bunch of knowledge through like mentorship and people that have done it before. And like that was one of the biggest things was like always check the zoning. Is this an area that has always been short-term rental friendly? Is there a possibility for it to change over and take it away from short term? So you might buy it and it's short term rental friendly now, but in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, can you still see this area being short term rental friendly? So, like your tourist destinations, you usually won't have an issue because that's their main that's their main economy for the most part. So they're going to be more short term rental friendly. But if you're buying in a more remote location or something that's very residential, I would just double check, triple check that it's going to one, it is short-term rental friendly now, and two, it'll still be short-term rental friendly into the future. You
Yeah,
don't
that's
want
a
to run
huge
into that
risk.
issue.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What would you say is we're going to do the best and worst? What would you say the hardest part of being a short-term rental landlord is?
I would say the time. It takes a lot of time to not only get it up and going, get it off the ground, but day-to-day operations. It's a constant flow until I wake up, until I go to sleep. Erin and I, we are, answering guests' questions, whether that's people at the property now or people looking to book, seeing what's going on in the area, making sure everyone's doing well, are things working. It's just constant. You're constantly on. I mean, we love it though. We love that we get to, procure these experiences for guests to have the same thing because at the end of the day, that's kind of the driving force behind like why we do it. It's like we want people to experience what we were able to experience growing up. Like how do we, elevate that and make it a little bit better? But definitely the time. It's definitely not a passive investment at all. And you might see that on podcasts or people posting things if you're looking online and people are like, oh, you could buy a short-term rental and like it'll just run. I would advise against that. I would say your time is going to be spent, making sure that this thing works and making sure that you're, providing the correct experience for your guests and you're not just putting it up there.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective because I think I've been sold that lie plenty of times. That like, yeah, just get a rental. It's easy and short-term rental. So I appreciate you clarifying that for most people. What's the best part of being a short-term rental landlord?
And the best part is like hearing the stories from the families. We don't know majority of these groups. We've had family and friends stay up there because they're looking for a place, but 99% of the people that stay there, we've never known them before. And I feel like there's a couple people now that they've gone there 3, 4, 5, 6 times. I feel like we know them like family. Like we talk to them, we text with them. They're like, hey, I'm coming up again. What's going on? We had a family that was from Arizona that was in the area. They liked it so much they ended up moving to the
Wow.
Lake George area. So I feel like you establish that connection between your guests, and you really know that you're doing a good job when they're having a great time and having a nice experience. So that's like the best feeling that you can get out of it.
I'm curious who your typical clientele is. Like, what's the demographic of people renting your Airbnbs or your short-term rentals?
So I would say it depends seasonally. During the peak months of May to Labor Day, shoulder season, a little bit before, a little bit after, I'd say it's more families, probably 4 to 5 guests, small kids, pet usually. Over half our stays are
With
pets
pets?
with them. So that's why another thing, like we really want to have, an experience where people can bring their pets with them.
Is that a headache on your end?
So when we first started, we thought it was going to be a headache. So we designated half the cabins to be pet friendly, half of them not to be pet friendly, almost as like a trial run because
That's a great
we had
idea.
no idea what was
Yeah.
going on. And then we realized like people who are bringing their pets are very respectful. They want to bring them. They're part of the family. Like they should be there too. So after the trial run, everything was working out, totally fine. And then we opened it up to the entire property. And it's definitely been great because people have been sending us photos of their stay. Their dogs are next to the fire pit with the kids with
Great
the
content.
s'mores.
Great
And it's
content.
like great to see that because that's they're part of the family just as somebody else
Yeah.
is. So to be able to offer that, that's been a huge plus.
That's great. That's cool. And I'm surprised by that also. See, I'm learning so much about. I assumed like, well, it's great to have our dog places that I would just be a headache for. Because yeah, my dog's great, but like I have no idea what that somebody else's dog is like. But you're right. Most people that do want to travel with their pets are typically pretty respectful with that.
Yeah, and I will say, like, being a location, it's another thing if you're looking to get into short-term rentals. If you're a driving destination, most people who are going to rent, if they have a pet, are going to want to bring their pet with them. So if you have a Airbnb in the Bahamas, obviously you're flying there, so you're most likely not going to bring your pet. But if you're a driving distance, you should be able to offer that to the guests to be able
Yeah.
to bring the whole family, as we
Yeah.
say.
No, that's great. Well, I like to wrap up these interviews with a pretty similar question with everybody. So, like, and which is similarly, what's one thing you wish you knew when you first started this business?
It's a great question. One thing I knew, I wish I knew how much time it would take and effort. We've had crazy jobs and our entrepreneurial spirit through from college all the way till now, and we know like how much time and effort it takes. But I feel like a short-term rental, there's like it's another step up of like you're always constantly on, but it's a good feeling to almost feel like you're necessary, you're wanted, and like what you're doing is important.
Yeah.
You know, all these families that are
I mean, you're
coming.
not selling meatballs at 2 o'clock in the morning, but something can very much break at the Airbnb or the cabin at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time. So thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
And you mentioned prior, or like we were talking, that you guys are starting to do consulting. Is that so? Can you elaborate briefly on that?
Yeah, so we're looking to expand our short-term rental knowledge and kind of what we've learned along the way is almost like a helping tool, stepping stool for people to make that jump. You know, it's a very rewarding area to kind of start from nothing and then see where it gets to. And I feel like a lot of people, you know, are hesitant to do it, or they might see something online and it says like, oh, it's very easy to do this. But you know, we're very helpful and hopeful to share our story, share our knowledge, bumps in the road that we hit, little tips and tricks. So something we're looking to get into and start consulting and kind of help people along their journey as well.
Yeah, that's great. I look forward to seeing what's coming for you guys. So good luck.
Thank you.
Absolutely.